32. I just turned 32. So that's a fun thing about Representative Sullivan, Cwach, and I'm now 32.
I'm sure we're going to be scared of that fact, or...
Taylor Swift's going to write a song about it.
Excellent. So, Erin, you mentioned that you work, Ryan is self-employed, so to speak. I mean, you know, we all work for somebody, but he runs his own business. Talk to us a little bit about how Midco navigates this for you.
Yeah, so Midco is a really great company when it comes to you know, like your personal life and finding a work-life balance. So what I did when I was interested in running for office, I went and spoke with my direct boss, who I report to every day, and I told him I was interested in running for office, and he said, "Great, I have no idea what that means." And so he kind of went to his boss, who went to his boss, who went to HR. And then they basically discussed it and determined that that would be all right, and that if I won, and the time came to discuss what we would do while I was actually in Pierre, that would be okay, and we could figure that out at the time. So after I won, I went back and I spoke with my boss, and I thought about working part-time, but I decided to take a full leave of absence, which worked out with my situation. So I guess any advice for you would be, if you are working full-time at a company, small or large, just sit down with your boss and have a good conversation about it and tell him or her your intentions and why it's important to you and how it will make a difference for the company that you work at, because being an elected official at a company is something that a lot of businesses think is a really solid quality to have at their place. So yeah, that's about it.
Just trying to drag things out just a little bit. We're going to go ahead and get started. And we'll let's
jump into that.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and get started with talking about your political bio. What got you interested? What gave you the impetus to jump into this race? And kind of talk to us about the history of how you got interested not only in Democratic politics, but becoming an active member of that game.
So I was really fortunate with this campaign because my first campaign experience or political experience was really working as an intern in high school for Senator Tim Johnson's 2002 campaign. And I represent Yankton. I'm from Yankton. And so I worked on his campaign just in that county. So literally everything I did in this election is what I learned from just that 2002 campaign. I just did the same thing, and then with the technology updates, was able to do it better, just because of all the new technology. So that's really how I kind of got involved, and I was a debater in high school, and I really like talking about policy.
Great debater in high school.
Yeah.
State champion kind of debater.
And my friends and I got involved because actually what it was is my friend Chris, his brother Matt, was going to be the field organizer in Yankton County for Tim Johnson. And Matt realized, well, I could get some volunteers here. So we just started coming in. And that's kind of how it started with me, and I was just hooked. And campaigning and running for office was something at an early age I felt that I wanted to do and that I might be good at.
I also got started at a young age. I interned on Representative Stephanie Sandlin's campaign back in 2004 when I was in high school, and that's kind of what perked my interest. So moving forward, I was just really active in high school and college, Young Democrats, and then after college I went to grad school, and that's kind of why I became really interested in state politics. So I wrote my master's thesis on constituent policy preference in the state of South Dakota, and I used abortion as my case study, and I found that the legislation that we see happening in our state is not accepted by those constituents of those specific people from their districts. But they were still voting for these people, and it's because they're just not aware that their representatives are the ones bringing this legislation and voting for it. And I really thought that this was still prevalent in our state just a few years ago when I decided to run for office, and that we still see a lot of constituents not getting good legislation out of the state of South Dakota.
So you got hooked, you got the political bug, and you got your petitions. Talk to us about the process from getting your petitions through to election day.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, this is interesting. So, okay, when you decide to run, you can start petitioning the year of the election on January 1st. So I'm sure Representative Cwach did the same thing as I did. I started petitioning on January 1st. I collected, 4 times the amount of signatures I needed, which it seems like a big amount, but it's not. I had to collect 26 signatures because of my district and the amount of voters who turned out from the last election. So that's what the numbers are based off of. So I went over that amount because 1, it's easy, and 2, it's a good idea to do that because you want to make sure that no one signed it twice and that you are getting enough signatures from people within your district. So I'm going to hand this off to, we can go back and forth and piggyback on each other here.
Yeah, so I guess for me, I think when you're running a race, like a state house or state senate race, your campaign should probably start the April before. And so that's when I announced officially. And what I did is I made a calendar. That's the first thing I did. First thing I did was I made a calendar. Second thing I did is I wrote down the name of every single person who I thought might give me $1 and hopefully some more. And so I wasn't planning to call these people, but I'll send a letter and we'll see what we get back in terms of money. And so those were the first 2 things I did. And that's really important because once you put that calendar together of all the different things you're going to do, it makes it feel a lot easier to accomplish. And you kind of have a plan. But those are the first 2 things I did. And then, April, May, June, those are pretty easy months. It's just about fundraising. I sent out a fundraising letter, made some phone calls and things so I could kind of have a war chest. But then the campaign plan and the calendar, I knew how all that money was going to be spent. So I'll hand it back to you if you want to talk about the next couple months.
Yeah, so, can we take questions during?
Okay. We'll do questions right after this.
Cool.
Yep.
So, yes, a lot of fundraising occurs during that time before, while you're petitioning and during that April timeline. And then the real work starts. So, you've developed your message by now. You probably have a website and a few professional pictures taken for your website and all of your literature that you plan to, start circulating. So in April or May is the time that I started to draft all of what my literature would look like. And the literature is what you bring door to door with you and you leave on the actual door itself if they're not home. And then you actually start coming up with who exactly you want to target and who you want to talk to. So what we did, you look at your district as a whole and you determine what your winning number would be. And for me, and as I'm sure Representative Cwach and I know Representative Sullivan, we had to dip into a lot of Republicans within our district to actually win this campaign. So what I did personally was I knocked on every single Democrat's door, every single independent's door, and a large number of Republicans who were somewhat leaning moderate to accomplish that winning number because you know a percentage of those people will not be voting for you.
Yeah, I did the same thing, and one of the things I did that I think I would encourage everybody to do is, we always say South Dakota is a small state, but then we get too focused on the data part of it. What I did is to get at, because I needed Republican votes too. There's an 1,800 Republican advantage in Yankton County. So what I did is I printed out the list of every Republican in my district that always votes in the election. And how I define that is, in the last 4 elections, they voted in each one. And then to add some more in, Republicans who voted in 3 of the last 4. And I printed out that list. And I had my friends and just anyone who I could trust look over that list and highlight names of persuadable Republicans. So when I went after Republicans, it was very targeted, and that I know, oh, my friend Nathan Johnson said this guy is a pretty decent guy to talk to and work with, and he's going to hear me out. He might not vote for me, but he's going to hear me out. And that made a huge difference, because then you're not, I was never worried about necessarily going to a Republican door and getting into an argument, because these people were already identified for me. Yeah, and so going back to I think the thing, when you get to June and July and August, you kind of have your parades and stuff, and I worked a lot on the website and everything too. Come August, what I did is I made a decision, since I was young, I didn't know a lot of people in my district yet, and the Democratic Party is kind of cliquey in Yankton, and it's small. I made the decision I was going to knock on every Democrat's door that always votes in an election. Because those people, I know I'm going to get them. Even if I didn't knock on their doors, I was going to get their vote. But I also knew those were going to be my energetic voters. They were the people who were going to give me my yard signs to advertise and everything. So I just wanted to introduce myself to them and kind of build my reputation up with them, because they're the ones who are easy to get to go out and kind of talk to you at the watering hole, so to speak. And so that's what I did in August, and then in September is really when it kicks off. So what did you do, after Labor Day?
I think I started before Labor Day, so I started knocking on doors. When is Labor Day? This is a really...
September 4th.
Yes, I started before Labor Day. That's really
I may have too, actually.
I started in late June, so I started knocking on doors, and I was determined to knock on the entire district. And so I started a few times a week, and then a few weeks into that, I was like, nope, I'm gonna knock every day. So I went out every day after work and knocked on doors for 4 hours, Monday through Friday. And then on Saturday and Sunday, I went out and knocked on doors from 11 to about 4-ish, or 3:30, 4-ish o'clock. And I loved it. It was so much fun. It was great meeting people. I had a lot of really great conversations. And the thing about door knocking is it's better to ask them what they care about and what they would like to see happen in the state of South Dakota than it is to tell them about who you are and what your message is. And you can incorporate your message into door knocking and into that conversation, but it's so important to be like, I'm here because I care about you and I want to know what you think we need to do in our state. Like, how can we make our state a better place to live through legislation? And that resonates so well. And I think if you want to be an elected official, that is the way to do it, because we're here to represent the people. We're not here to represent ourselves. So that was really helpful, I think, in my campaign. Going out every single day, I managed to knock on, over 5,000 doors twice. So I knocked on probably over 8,000 doors, just because I had people dropping literature in areas that I knew I wouldn't need to knock on those doors again. But yeah, you learn a lot about your district if you start earlier, because that means if you make it through your entire list, you can start over again and you know more about the areas of your district and how you need to approach it again.
Yeah, we targeted too in our campaign, actually. I think borderline started irritating a few people, because if they wouldn't tell me who they were voting for, I was coming back to their house. That was just a promise I made to myself. I didn't tell them that that was the deal. There were times where I wanted to be like, just tell me you're voting for me and I will leave you alone. Or tell me you're not voting for me and I'll curse your name under my breath. But door knocking is kind of the part we'll talk about first, because it's the most time consuming part of it. And I think it's really important. So just like Erin, I never went up to a door really with an agenda or like a script of what I wanted to say. Most people just, our government's so broken right now that if someone comes to their door and says, I'm running for office and I just want to know what's important to you, it just blows them away. And it makes it really easy. And you'll get some difficult conversations where sometimes, yeah, that Republican that my friend identified was reasonable, but he sure does like to talk, he's not voting for me. And so you have those difficult doors, but most doors are pretty easy. Most people are just shocked you came to their door at all. So we were able to go through our list 3 times, because I had 2 high schoolers knocking doors with me. Basically every time I went out and knocked doors, they knocked doors. And then they actually had to do a few more hours themselves too. They each had to do 25 hours. So collectively we were spending 70 hours probably knocking doors every week. And in a small town like Yankton, you can really do that. And it becomes really manageable too when you have that plan and you identify your voters. And what's nice, we actually got into a problem at the end. We were getting so good at identifying who was voting for us and who wasn't, that when we were starting to cut our new list of people to talk to, we were like, we'd have to go like blocks to talk. So it became inefficient because we had already talked to everybody on that block. So by the end, it was a little burdensome, but we got through it. So.
I think that's
Well,
it. You literally campaign up until polls closing on election day. Canvass door to door.
So I guess let's talk about messaging maybe, and if you want to jump in, Helen.
We have somebody who has questions,
Oh.
so if it's specific to what they were just talking about, then we can do it now and
Okay.
wait, it's fresh in their heads.
Can you talk a little bit about the process for getting your campaign registered through the Secretary of State's website?
Oh. Sure.
The paperwork is important.
These details that we forget because it's been a while. So yeah, you have to fill out an organization statement of organization, which basically states what your committee name is minus Healy for House, and who your treasurer is, and you actually have to get, what is that? That's for bank. You have to get a bank account for your committee once that's been formed. But you just submit it through the Secretary of State's website, and actually the people who we were working with through Governor Dugard's administration were wonderful and so helpful. If you had any questions, you could call and they would answer it. I think a lot of them are still there. So I don't think anything will change under Governor Noem's administration. But yeah, they're there to answer any questions you might have about the process itself. But a super simple form that when the time comes, we're here to help walk you through.
Reports and add. Yeah, reports.
Yeah, I think the one thing you should get an employer identification number too with the IRS. You can just Google employer identification number and it'll pop up. Just make sure it says .gov, because there's a lot of companies that try and say they can get the EIN for you for a small fee of like 60 to $100, but it's actually really easy to do on your own as long as you know your social security number, which I hope you do. And otherwise, yeah, so you set up that statement of organization, you have your bank account, and then you have to fill, if you had a primary, you have to do a pre-primary report. And I actually think we changed the law, so now that every candidate has to do a primary report, whether you had a primary or not. That was one of the things we changed this year. And then you'll have to do one in October about 7 days before the election, you'll have to do a campaign finance report too. And so that aspect of it, I did all of my campaign finance stuff. I kept track of it through Quicken, and it worked out pretty good. We don't have very specific reporting requirements in South Dakota, so you can like advertising. Like I think I grouped like my newspaper, my radio, and my Facebook advertising all in one little chunk there. So it doesn't have to be very detailed, but I did keep track of it through Quicken. You actually don't write a lot of checks during the campaign. You just write a couple big ones for your yard signs and your media buys. So it's not too daunting to take care of that.
And they send reminders on, like,
Yeah.
your mail with reminders.
They do send reminders, that's good. So I'm wondering a couple of different things. I'm wondering in regards to the surrogates. You talked, Ryan, about the teenagers, the high school kids that went with you. Tell me about the effectiveness of the surrogates on these local campaigns like you're dealing with. Did you feel like they were helpful, or did you feel like it would have been better if you knocked every door yourself? Okay, so that's my first question. I'm going to say both of them so you guys can answer both. You didn't say anything about calling. So did you guys use calling in your campaigns? Okay, talk about that if you would. Questions?
Yeah. So I had the best we call them young elected legislative leaders, and if they work on a campaign, the name we call them is Yell Fellows. So I'm going to refer to them as that. I had the best Yell Fellows in the state, hands down. Carter and Kaya they were just freshmen actually, so I was kind of nervous because that's a really young age to go door to door. But they're so smart, intelligent, and they're good with dealing with people. So for me, having those young people go door to door was huge. And one of the things I would really stress, whether it's a young person or an older person, because I had people volunteer, just go knock doors for an hour or two, it's not your campaign. You're just the name that's associated with the campaign, but you're running on these principles that you hope a majority of the people in your district agree with. And so you shouldn't feel like you have to do it all, because if you're gonna try and do it all, it's really difficult and you're gonna lose. You have to rely on other people, you have to go out and get volunteers, and people wanna help, is what I found, is they were really excited to go out and do some door knocking. So that was, I think they're huge to have that young person helping, and if you are gonna run for office, I really recommend you do get like a Yell Fellow, because the way the program works is you're basically paying them, they get paid $10 an hour, which is a pretty good deal for a freshman in high school. But you as a candidate only pay 5 of those hours. $5, I mean. So that's a steal in my mind, because door knocking is the most valuable thing. And if you can get people to go out there and do that for you, and it's only costing you $5 an hour, that's the best money you can spend. So do you want to talk about calling here?
Sure. I'll also just add really quick, I didn't have a fellow. I ran basically off of all volunteers, friends of mine and a lot of people in my district who just wanted to help out. But I also had a number of people who were dedicated to helping once a week or twice a week. So that was incredibly helpful too. Calling, I actually didn't know calling, and that's because people don't answer their phones. So we are seeing kind of I mean, calling used to be a thing. Hello, Kelly.
Right.
Calling used to work for larger campaigns when you are across the whole entire state and this is your one option. But when you're running a campaign for a district, you really don't need to do those calls, and you're not going to get a lot out of it because people don't answer their phones for numbers they don't recognize. I never do. I'm sure all of you are shaking your heads. You never do. So it's pointless. You're not going to get anything out of it. So skip the calling and get your tennis shoes on and hit the pavement.
Representative Sullivan has joined us, and so I'm going to give her a chance to introduce yourself and give a little bit of your political history, and then we'll get you jumped right into the rest of it.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry for my tardiness. I apologize for that. My name is Representative Kelly Sullivan. I represent District 13, which is just south of downtown Sioux Falls. It goes into Lincoln County. So my political background, I don't really have one, honestly. I've been an activist for a long time. I followed the legislature for the last 5 or 6 years, and I got involved after the 2016 election, more involved than I was, I should say. I helped organize the Women's March in 2017, and that was kind of what got the ball rolling for me. And I decided to run for office. I'm glad I did, because I ended up winning, and now I've got a seat in the legislature, so it's great.
Jennifer, did you have any follow-ups, or did that kind of?
I actually have other questions, but I want to let other people talk if
Okay,
you want it.
Perfect.
Hi. My question is, you all ran very urban campaigns, right? Did you do, Ryan, I guess, did you do any country, door-to-door knocking, and what would be your suggestion for people that have a very rural area, that they do have pretty wide spaces that they have to cover?
That makes your campaign a lot more interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah. So this kind of ties into that question too. So I did call people that I could not easily walk to. So everyone who had a 5-digit mailing address in rural Yankton County, I did call them. But then, we have 4 small towns in Yankton County, and I knocked on everyone's door in the small town. So we're able, because we are bigger, to kind of target, like in a town like Yankton, it makes sense to kind of, you don't want to talk to that Trump supporter, because it's just not a good use of your time, and frankly not a good use of their time. You should be respectful of that. But in those small towns where we had to make the drive, I knocked on every door. So to look at a rural campaign, I think it is more difficult. I think you have to call in those rural areas because they're so spread out, and it does become geographically hard. One of the things I think can counter that to a certain extent is actually Facebook and Google. A cool thing I did with Google is you can pinpoint precisely who you want to see your ads on Google or YouTube, and it's incredibly cheap as a local candidate to advertise like on YouTube, because no one is spending money to specifically target Yankton County or Brown County. And so I would get a YouTube ad. My YouTube ads, I had 4 of them, and they ran over 90,000 times just in Yankton County. People were, again, kind of getting a little irritated with the saturation. And so I think that might be a good way. And I know we're thinking, well, they're rural people, they're probably not on YouTube. That's just not true. Everyone's on YouTube. And same with Facebook. Those people are out there, and that's a way to engage them, outside of going door to door. But it is true that we're all kind of in more urban areas, and so it's a little, our strategies might not necessarily work in those smaller towns. But you kind of ran in a rural area, didn't you?
I did. Like that.
Yeah.
So I don't want to supersede any of this, but having been in a rural community, it is harder. It does add a different dynamic to your campaign. One of the strategies that I used was during harvest season, because they are starting harvest in October, and the tractors and wagons are lined up at the elevators, and you door to door the tractors. Literally, I would walk from one tractor or truck to the next. Hi, how are you doing? Did you have a good harvest? I'm Paula. And then we would talk. And you did door to door at the elevator. It was fantastic, and they loved it. Some of them didn't, but some of them were like,
Okay, so if we're gonna talk about door to door and social media, then I think it's also really important to mention mailings because that was also a really large part of my campaign as well as Representative Sullivan's. Was it yours? And Representative Cwach's. So I had 6 mailers, and I sat down before the campaign and kind of outlined what each one would be about. So I had one about healthcare, and I had one about education, and I had my very first one introducing who I am and why I'm interested in running. And I can't remember what the one was on the precincts and where you can go to vote. And I can't remember what the other ones were about, but I had 6 of them, and I had them strategically placed from like a month and a half out to a few days or the day before the election, so people could keep seeing my face over and over and over again and seeing my message and a different message every time that related to that. So I also did Facebook advertising. I specifically targeted District 14, which you do with a circle radius, which makes it a little difficult, but you can kind of play around with it. So I'll let Representative Sullivan answer what she did, because I know she had a few interesting ways that she even got herself out into the community.
While you answer that question, you've all talked about targeting. Where'd you get your data?
That's a good point. So I will. So as far as just getting out there and getting yourself out there, whether you're rural, whether you're urban, whatever you are, something that I did is I went to as many events as I possibly could. So any event that was happening around my area, I would go to. And I would table, I would have a booth, I would talk to people, I would register voters. I registered over 100 voters, and I only won by 80 votes. So that GOTV, that Get Out the Vote effort, was really helpful. And I did do mailers as well. But what was your question?
Where did you get your data?
Oh, my data.
Targeting.
So as far as targeting is concerned, the way that I did it, I'm not sure how my colleagues here did it, but what I did was looked at, there's different scores that you can use, and we used an app that the Democratic Party, the National Party, utilizes, and you can specifically target people. So you're targeting how they've, voted in the past, different organizations that they're with. I mean, it's data that comes from the Democratic Party, which was excellent. So I would do, if you voted in or had a score, like a Democratic score of up to, I think I did 90% or 85%, like 10% to 85%. If you voted in a way that was any way Democratic, you would be getting some kind of information from me, some kind of literature from me, door knocking, lit dropping, mailers. And so that's how we do the targeting, is kind of, you have a score, different people have a score on how democratically you vote, and then you utilize that data to figure out who you're going to target. And so since I was in a heavily Republican district, I did target all the way down to 10%. If you have done anything in a Democratic way, 10% of the time, you were going to get something from me because I was trying to sway those voters. And it worked, which was great.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Jerry.
Yeah, you mentioned something about fundraising right away when you started. How much money do you think a candidate should have in here when they start a campaign? Or not even when they start during the whole campaign?
Yeah, I think to run like a decent campaign, $15,000 would probably do it. I think we all raised more than that, but I think 15,000 is probably about the number you would need. And that sounds like a lot of money, but people want to donate to your campaign. People are excited that you're running. Honestly, some people, a lot of times I had people provide, say they were relieved that someone competent was running this time around, and that helped me get a bigger check. So 15,000 is completely doable. And I called they always tell you make phone calls asking for money. I maybe called 10 people, honestly, just like good friends, and they were more like stick-up calls, like why haven't you given me the money yet, as opposed to like me trying to persuade them. I was very fortunate. The thing I did, and what I would recommend everyone do, is I knew pretty much everyone on my list of people I was asking for money, and so I wrote a letter, a fundraising pitch letter, that was just kind of a summary of my background and why I'm running. And then it was a 2-pager front and back. On the back I left a lot of space, and I spent like 2 weeks just writing a handwritten message to everybody. Personal message, just whatever connection I had with them, I put down. Because that's a really effective fundraising tool. And 2, I wanted to convey that that person's important to me. I'm not just trying to shake them down for money. And that really, for a lot of times, it kind of became emotional because it's like, God, I don't even get to see this person anymore. But that got a huge response back just by putting that little message on the end. And if I didn't know them and they were on my list, or if I didn't know them well, I just would say, hey, I really appreciate you considering making a donation. So one of the things I did, I took the State Central Committee list and I sent a letter to every single person on that. And I remember there was a woman from Gettysburg who sent me a nice note back and said, I don't know who you are, but you seem like a nice guy, and you actually wrote a message to me, so here's $20.
I'll add just a little bit to that, but you summed that up nicely. So I also went to Open Secrets, I think it's .org, and I started researching every single person who's given money in the state of South Dakota, and then you just start finding the people who donated to Democrats and the zip codes that you represent. And I just cold lettered, if you want to call it that. I sent them a letter. It was like a cold call, but a letter. I sent them a letter, and it actually worked. I got a lot of money out of that, and I also did what Ryan did. Handwritten notes go a long way, and reminding people on social media that this isn't for me, this is for the state of South Dakota, and this is to make a better South Dakota.
So $15,000. I only raised about $13,500. I raised a little bit towards the very end. But as far as fundraising is concerned, of course, that is incredibly important. We need money to run a campaign. We need money to win elections. But really, as a candidate, what you need to do is you need to work hard. Because like I said, I raised under $15,000 and I still won my election. And that's because I worked my tail off. I worked. So when it does come to fundraising, like they said, calling people, writing letters, just asking people. There was a few times, I'm a bartender, I work at a bar, and I would just be having a conversation with somebody about my campaign, and they would be really excited about it, and I would cold ask, would you be willing to donate to my campaign? And they always were. It never hurts to ask. The worst thing that somebody can do is say no. And like they said, people want to donate to your campaign. People want to help you get elected, especially if you are a worthy candidate that is working hard, is a new face, and has good ideas. So always ask every single person you know if they will donate money to your campaign, because they likely will.
Okay, so, right.
I don't need the microphone.
Yeah.
I was just going to mention another good source for mailings is get as many signatures on your nominating petitions as you can. And you've got a ready-made list right there. All you have to do is type it in because they got the name and the address and the whole works.
Yeah, I did that too.
A ready introduction. Thank you for signing my nominating petition. Send money.
SOS. All right, so now you've done your campaign, you've raised your money, you've made your calls, you've done your door knocking, you've been elected. Talk to us a little bit about what it's like being a freshman Democrat, no offense to you, and you two, a woman in Pierre, a young gentleman in Pierre, and a lawyer to boot. Dude, you're brave. talk to us about what that's like, coming in, navigating that, and finding your place and making your path, because you all made one hell of a path this year. Congratulations to all three of you. Yeah. You've done this job. So now talk to us about that. I'm gonna let Kelly start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Navigating Pierre. So I didn't really know what to expect. After November 6th, I honestly thought I was going to get a little break, which was absolutely insane to think about because I did not. So when you run for office and when you win your election, know that it is a whirlwind after that. So fortunately, there's a ton of events that you're invited to once you're elected to office within your area. And so going to those events and you're able to meet area legislators, you're able to meet people that you will soon be working with once you're in session. So that was really helpful just as far as getting familiar with different people that I would be around, because I really didn't know what to expect once I actually got to Pierre. And so once I actually got to Pierre, navigating, what do they say? It's like drinking out of a fire hose, because there's just a lot of information coming towards you. It's a lot to deal with within your first year, which makes me really excited for the next session. It makes me excited for 2020, because I know the ropes a little bit better. But walking into it, honestly, it was a little scary. I didn't know what was gonna happen, what to expect, how people were gonna react to me. But fortunately, we, as the Democrats in the House, have a really strong caucus. We have a really great group of people, and we all embraced each other, and we're able to lean on each other, and we're able to have conversations that needed to be had in order to help ourselves navigate what was going on. As much as it was a lot all at once, it was very doable. I mean, colleagues across the aisle, within the committees that I'm on, were very helpful and encouraging, and it's like starting any other new job. It's scary, and you don't know what to expect, but as long as you're in it for the right reasons, you're going to do well, as long as you can connect with people and have conversations, and that's kind of how I try to navigate it, is just meeting people, becoming more comfortable with the situations, and asking a ton of questions. I never felt like any question was a stupid question, and all of my colleagues across the aisle and within our caucus were more than happy to answer any question that I had, and that was really great. I mean, there's a beautiful camaraderie that is within the legislature. As much as there's craziness that happens and differences of opinions and fundamentally disagreeing politically on many things, most people within the legislature want you to do well. They want you to succeed, and they want you to be representing your district as best as you can. And so that's what I try to do, just through making connections with people.
I think you covered that really well. Navigating as a young woman, I really didn't sense anything different than what my other colleagues, were experiencing. Going into it and presenting myself as someone who was there to do the work and there to create relationships and get along with people and respect them and really dive deep into the legislation, I think people respect that. And as a freshman legislator, and there's only 11 of us Democrats, we don't get the luxury to sit there and watch what's going on and not introduce legislation. We have to introduce legislation because there's only 11 of us. And it's so great because we're all very incredibly motivated people. We want to help the state of South Dakota. We want to do the right thing. We care about autism. We care about, preschool and education and hate crimes and people of the LGBT. And those are all things that are areas that we introduced this year because we care about it and it was the right thing to do. And that makes it easy being a freshman legislator because you just jump in and you learn it fast and you just do what you gotta do to succeed.
Yeah, so I never publicly got angry with anybody. I never got privately angry at them. These two were kind of my sounding board, honestly. And so that's credible. I think that's incredibly important, because if you come off as an angry Democrat, they're just gonna ignore you. And so one of the things I made a point of doing early on was focusing on the non-partisan bills that come forward. So there's a lot of bills that come from like the different departments or agencies. They run into this issue with the law during the year, so it needs to be changed. And partly because I'm a lawyer and I draft legal language for my livelihood, I had a certain advantage there to where some bills would come to us and they were written terribly. And so through the committee process, I would actually work to make the bill just sound better. You know, not trying to pull a fast one, but it's like, if we're gonna do this, let's do it well, type of mantra. And that made a huge difference, I think, in terms of how Republicans viewed me. I think for the vast majority of the Democrats in the legislature, the Republicans came off pretty positive about us, people willing to work with them, because we have to work with them. There's only 11 of us, unfortunately. The other thing that's interesting about Pierre is there's actually 3 parties up there. There's us, and then there's the moderates, and then there's the conservatives. And the conservatives are probably the largest group, and that kind of shifts back and forth. So there's some moderates that are more conservative, and some conservatives that can be a little bit more moderate. So there's like 10 people, you never know where they're gonna end up. But that presents an advantage to us, or an opportunity for us to go and try and work. So, for instance, when the governor was proposing something that we liked, that usually meant the conservatives didn't like it. But the moderates want the governor to succeed. So we could work with the moderates on that to get that legislation passed or stopped. Similarly, if the governor's doing something we don't like, that usually the conservatives don't like it either up there. So we could work with them to try and have some influence over that legislation. So even though we're small, the Republican Party in Pierre is so fractured that there is a lot of opportunity. And like we said last night at our little fundraiser, our goal is to get 20 Democrats in the House for this next election. And if we have 20, 2 things are probably going to happen. One, we're going to have a lot more influence if the Republican Party stays fractured, because then we're pretty much an equal party with those other 2. So that's kind of the goal. The fear would be that because there'd be 20 Democrats, the Republicans might all get their act together, but I don't know, I doubt it.
So I want to thank these 3 very quickly. Let's give them a nice round of applause. And then we've got about 5 minutes to do some open question forum time. So I did see Sharon's hand first, and then I'll come right here.
Well, first of all, I think we're all sitting here wishing we had these young people in our district. I mean, this is just an exemplary group of young panelists, and we know there's more of you out there. We just hope we can find more 32-year-olds of your caliber. My question is, just wondering, what committee do you serve on, and were those the committees that you wanted? Or did you get the ones you wanted, and is it what you thought it was when you got in there?
So I got put on judiciary because I'm a lawyer. I actually didn't want to be on judiciary. I don't necessarily care, but I kind of knew that was going to happen. And then I got put on local government. I wanted to be on education, I think health and human services. But I think Erin got on those, and actually those committees were run horribly, and I was really thankful I wasn't on them.
I am on health and human services and education, and I love the committees, but it is very frustrating at times to sit there. And what happened this year, well, here, I'll let Kelly tell her committees, and then I'll come back to this.
All right, it'll be easier.
So I'm also on local government, Representative Cwach, and I'm also on commerce and energy. Those weren't my top committees that I had asked for. but I mean, I was just gonna let the chips fall where they may, and I was gonna take what I got, and that's what I did. And I'm very happy to be on both of those committees. Local government, I think we met 6 times. I mean, we did not meet very often. And the Speaker of the House is the person that assigns what bills goes to what committees. And I think there were some bills that should have gone through local government that didn't. And we had a pretty balanced committee. I mean, there was some, very conservative folks on that, but there was also some good moderates, a couple of good Democrats. So it was a really balanced committee, and I think we could have had a lot more bills come through it. And then Commerce and Energy has just been a learning experience for me. I've been in the hospitality service industry for most of my career, so there's a lot of alcohol bills that come through there. Those I'm familiar with, but as far as the energy bills, I'm learning, and I plan to continue learning and touring some solar energy places as well as wind turbines, and just doing some more research this summer so that I'm more prepared for 2020. So.
Okay, so Kelly and I have done this so many times together, I knew exactly what she was going to say. But what happened this year was we did see a lot of people switch around from committees that they used to be on to new committees because the Speaker of the House is new and is doing things his way. But that also means that we saw a lot of brand new chairs, and as Representative Cwach said, it was really difficult at times to sit through some of these committees because they were brand new chairs of people who've only served 1 term prior to their 2nd term, which just began this year. So there's a lot of inefficiencies. I hope some of those are cleared up a little bit as we move forward into our next year, but time will tell.
I have 2 related questions. The first is, how early can you start canvassing door to door? And the second is, how many doors is it practical to knock on?
Yeah, so I think trying to answer this for everybody. June, I think you can start knocking on doors after the primary. Yeah, I waited till after the primary, just so there was a primary for the county commission in Yankton, so I didn't want people to get me confused with that. And then the number of doors, I mean, if you start in June, you can knock 5,000 doors 3 times, and you can win.
John?
Well, you know what my question's going to be about.
Environment.
Yeah.
Now that you're in, and I thank you guys for your hard work getting in there. Now that you're in, I would like to know how much research you've done into Arctic methane release, the IPCC, the dire warnings they have in our near future, the United Nations. We are not passing laws in this state to get renewables, to get electrical infrastructure, and it's because the people in Pierre that are writing these laws don't understand what's happening, what's going to happen real soon. So,
okay, John, I'm going to let them speak to their environmental
my question
message.
is, what are you doing? How much information do you have on Arctic methane release in your mind? What do you do to tell these people to get them and push them towards renewables?
I can start. I'm like I said, I'm on the Commerce and Energy Committee, and I don't really know a lot about that. I know that we had a conversation, I think it was at the Women's March this year. I honestly don't know a lot about that, so currently I'm not doing anything on that specific issue. But as far as renewable energy is concerned, that is a concern in South Dakota. That is a huge concern. And so like I was saying before, talking about Commerce and Energy Committee, my chairperson, which is Representative Tim Rounds, he's planning to take our entire House Committee of Commerce and Energy, like I said, to go and tour solar energy places and go to different farms and go to energy companies that are doing wind energy and touring them, talking about it, figuring out what works, what doesn't, because there's a lot of pushback on renewable energy, especially wind energy. As great as it sounds, there's a lot of unintended consequences that come with wind energy that we need to be having a conversation about. And I'm seeing you kind of roll your eyes at that, but it's true. There are consequences to everything that we do. You know, there's an action to every, or there's a reaction to every action, right? So, excuse me. So as far as renewable energy is concerned, that is a concern of mine. I'm a member of Dakota Rural Action. I care about our environment. I care about us moving, you know, away from fossil fuels, moving away from the, you know, XL pipeline, for example. And that's something that I am actively working on. However, with your specific question, I don't know a lot about that. If you want to send information, I would love to read it. I would love to look at it. So as far as the environment is concerned, like, we do care about that. You know, as far as we're South Dakotans, of course we care about our environment. We care about what kind of energy we're utilizing, and it's a conversation that's being had. So unfortunately, with things like this, you know, it can move like molasses. It's not going to be a quick fix, and I am aware of the fact that we, you know, need to be working on this actively. And like I said, any information that you want to send my way, I would be happy to read and look over.
John Schmidt on Facebook.
All right.
A deal out.
Okay, we are over time, so I'm going to take one last question, and then we're going to round this out. Okay? The gentleman in the gray shirt. Yes.
Okay. So you guys all were interested at a certain time. Okay, I want to do this. What took you from I think I want to do it to I'm doing it? Like, what pushed you over that edge? And then the second part is, did you ever feel like, because it's so Republican in the state, that no matter how good I am, it's not going to matter, the numbers are, was there a fear? And obviously you all were team, did you have that fear through the process?
You want to go first?
What was the first question?
What made you?
What
pushed you over the edge to say I'm doing it?
I honestly don't know what pushed me over the edge. It's always been a thought in the back of my mind, and I think I wouldn't say the women's movement was what pushed me, but it empowered me and it made me feel like, yes, I can do this. But I feel like the final straw was just knowing back in, I think it was 2017 in that legislature, that our voices weren't heard, and I was just so angry. And if no one else is going to step up to the plate, why not me? You know, like, why not? Let's just try it. Let's see what happens. About your question, wondering if I ever felt like I wasn't going to win, or a sense of hopelessness, I guess. The night of the election, after I had won, my mentor asked me, "Did you ever think you're gonna lose?" And I sat there like, oh my gosh, I didn't even consider it. I didn't even consider like losing. I knew that it was a possibility, because obviously it goes one way or the other. But I worked so hard, and I put my whole life into it. And I even got so crazy to the point where I was like, oh my gosh, what's my next hobby going to be? It's like, it really turns into this huge portion of your life. But I don't think I ever thought about losing or what I would do if I lost. It just didn't really seem like an option at the time. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I didn't realize that until after I had already won.
So I have the polar opposite experience. I worked to win, I played to win, I fought to win. I didn't think I was gonna win. I really didn't. I was not in a district that I thought was winnable. However, I knew that working hard and talking to people and doing it, there was maybe a chance. But I did play to win, and I was actually surprised that I won. I really was. I was gonna get a dog, you know. But I mean, I'm so glad that I did win, and I'm glad that I played to win, because I'm very fortunate to be in this position. So yes, I had massive amounts of fear about not winning. But you've got to run to win. Otherwise, what's the point of doing it? And as far as what pushed me over the edge, I was actually emceeing a nonprofits event. The executive director is in the room, and it was towards the end of the event, and I had already decided that I wasn't going to run for office. It wasn't my time, it wasn't the moment, whatever, there's always something, right? And she said, hey, will anybody that's running for office please stand up? And I had just told this other nonprofit that I'm a board member of, I had told the entire board that I wasn't running for office, this wasn't my year. And she's like, well, anybody running for office, please stand up. And my body just froze. I just was like, you know, and the whole entire board that I'm on was like, what is Kelly doing? And so that was, I mean, it was kind of for me a spur of the moment decision. I just felt it. It was something I had been thinking about heavily for over a year, and I just decided to do it in that moment, which sounds a little crazy, but I also was asked to run for office maybe 15 times. So keep that in mind. If that is a seat that is germinating, not everybody runs for office the second that they think maybe it's a possibility. It took me like 15 times to be asked before I actually made that decision. And I will say, at the event that I was at, I did have a couple of people say like, "Hey, you're running for office," and I was like, "No, I don't think so." And then so it's not like it was completely random and spur of the moment, but people have to be asked. So keep that in mind. If you know anybody that you have an inkling of maybe could run for office, could be a potential candidate, is a hard worker, ask them more than once, because it does take many times before somebody actually makes that huge decision.
And women have to be asked more.
Agreed.
So I had thought about maybe running in 2016, but a lot of people kind of said that it wouldn't be a very good year to run, and I'm glad I listened to them, because it would not have been a good year to run. But after that election, that's kind of pretty much after that, I knew I wanted to run, because I was like, I felt like I had something to contribute to the state and to the discussion, and I was just kind of tired of pulling myself out. And so I worked really hard to put myself in a position where I could run. And as a young person, that's hard, because you got your student loan payments in particular. So I was constantly working, trying to figure out how can I run but fulfill that obligation. And so I had some time to prepare and plan for that. But it was pretty much after the 2016 election where I was like, okay, I'm tired of sitting on the sidelines here. I'm going to jump in. And then, was I ever concerned I was going to lose that fear because it is so Republican? You know, I really wasn't either, because a couple of unique circumstances for my district. One of the incumbents decided not to run, so there was an open seat. So that made it better. But then too, and most importantly, I felt I had the best plan to win my election. And so that's, if any of you are interested in running, as we close here, one of the things I want to say is I love putting together campaign plans. If you're willing to execute it, I will help you. I know Erin and Kelly will help you put together a good plan, good messaging, where you can go to those Republican doors and not worry about it. So, and then too, Billy Sutton was a big impact. He turned out a lot of people who I think wouldn't necessarily turn out in a midterm election. So for me, the big thing was, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's what a campaign is. And so when we're trying to eat into that Republican advantage, we just have to do it one day, one step at a time. And if you have that good campaign plan, it makes it really easy. And by the end of it, I was calling, I was knocking on doors. I even used a text program. I was texting people. We were doing the mail. I had YouTube ads. I was never concerned about losing, just because we had a good plan. And the Republican thing doesn't matter in South Dakota. It's overblown. If you come at them as just a Democrat, then it's an issue. But
thank you so much for joining us today. We've had a great discussion with these fine representatives of our state. I want to thank them again for being here to discuss what they did to get elected in South Dakota, and I'm quite certain that they will be wandering around for the next 20 minutes or so and would be more than happy to visit with you. And that's what you do as a politician. You talk a lot to people and you hear what they have to say, and I know they're very good at that. So thank you again. If we could give them one last round of applause.